Hello, this is Professor Brown-Cedarberg, and I'd like to talk about overloading methods. Now, when we have two or more methods in a class, those two methods having the same name, we have the overloading of methods. Now, when we overload a method, we overload on the parameter list. That is the number and type of parameters, the number and type of arguments that this method expects to be passed to it. Now, here's an example of overloaded methods. You'll notice that these methods are all public, static, void, and named my method. But these four methods all have different parameter list. The first looks for a single int, the second two ints, the third an int and a double, the fourth a double and an int. Here we have overloaded the method my method, and we overload on the parameter list, the number and type of parameters on that list, the arguments that are expected to be passed to the method. Now there are limits in overloading. You can't overload on the access, that is if a method is public or private, invocation, whether it's static or non-static, the return type, int, void, what have you. You also can't overload on the alias of the parameters. If I call a parameter A or B, I can't overload on that. I can only overload on the parameter list. Overloaded methods have the same access, invocation, return type. They have different parameter lists, the number and type of arguments that are expected to be passed to that method. Now when I call a method that requires an argument, I call the method and pass the argument, a value in. So here I'm calling my method, passing it 5, my method passing it a 5 and a 1, my method 5 and 1.1, my method 5.5 and 1. And we recall that I have four versions of my method, one that expects a single int, one that expects two ints, one that expects an int and a double, one a double and an int. So these are valid calls to my method, passing along values that match the number and type of one of my four overloaded methods. Now, if I call a method, an overloaded method, or any method, and I pass arguments that are not an exact match to those that are expected, Java will try to convert the type so that a method can be called. If I don't have an exact match, Java will try to convert if possible. So here are my four overloaded methods. Remember, I've got an int, two ints, an int and a double and an int. Now if I call a method, my compiler tries to find a match, does automatic conversion if possible and necessary. If not, if I can't do that, an error message will appear if my type conversion fails, and my program will end. Now here I'm calling my method, passing it a 5, and clearly the overloaded method that will fire is the one that looks for single int. Here I'm calling my method, I'm passing two doubles, 5.5 and 1.1. My compiler will look at the three remaining methods, named my method, and try to find a match, and if not, try to convert. But what we see is an int and an int is not a match to 5.5 and 1.1, two doubles. An int and a double, well, the second number matches, it's a double, the type, but the first, 5.5, can't be converted into an int. The next method, my method, looks for double and an int. Well, I'm passing in a double, so I have a match on the first item, but 1.1 can't be converted into an int. So here, I can't call any of those bottom three methods. I can't call any of the methods with 5.5 and 1.1. It's not a match, and I can't convert. Now what I also can have when I'm dealing with methods, overloaded methods, is some confusion. Here I have two methods. My method looks for an int and a double. My method looks for double and an int. If I were to call my method and pass it 5.5 and 4, and the only two methods that I had, the two overloaded versions of my method, one looked for an int and a double, one a double and an int, neither one of those could be called because my compiler won't know which one to call. You see that neither is an exact match to 5 and 4 as arguments passed in, but both of these methods could accommodate 5 and 4. The first method looks for an int and a double. Well, it'll clearly take the 5 and it'll just make the 4 into 4.0. The second method could also accommodate 5 and 4. The first number 5, the argument, will be converted into a double, and the second number 4 is a match for an int. So here my compiler won't know which method to fire, so it won't fire either one. So what we've looked at today are overloaded methods, and remember that methods are overloaded on the number and type in their parameter list. The parameter lists are what's important in overloading. We also saw that we can accommodate the processing, the calling of methods, overloaded methods, that might not be an exact match to the arguments passed through type conversion.